بعد فقال علي بن الحسين زين العابدين عليه الصلاة والسلام وأما حق يدك فأن لا تبسطها إلى ما لا يحل لك. صلوات بيجي محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing with our discussion that we've had about Risalat Al-Huquq. Last time we talked about the rights of your legs or the rights of your feet. And we pretty much finished what we were discussing except the last part of it, where we were talking about some of the ahadith in this regards as to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the various views on how body parts will be presented as the witnesses on the day of judgment. Obviously that verse from Surah Yasin, Al-Yawm nakhtimu ala afwahihim wa tukallimuna aydihim wa arjulihim, that today we have sealed the lips and only the hands and the feet will be bearing witness on that particular day. And we're talking about that, and we also discussed to an extent as to these feet will be the ones which will be taken insan either into the hell or in towards the heaven. And God informs us about this event in the following verse from Holy Quran, in Surah Maryam, verse number 71 and 72, in which it is actually a generalization where everyone is being addressed, that everyone will enter this hellfire. What does it say? It says, وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ حَتْمًا مَقْضِيًّا ثُمَّ نُنَجِّي الَّذِينَ اتَّقُوا وَنَذَرُ الظَّالِمِينَ فِيهَا جِثِيًّا. There is none of you but will come to it, matter that is decided certainly with your Lord. Then we will deliver those who are God-weary and leave the wrongdoers in it, fallen on their knees. Here, there's a discussion among the commentators of Quran as to when it says, وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا, which is addressing that there's not anyone who will not enter. That means, in other words, everyone will enter into this hellfire. So how you go ahead and explain such a thing? So there's extensive discussion among the interpreters regarding what is meant by the phrase that you shall all enter hell. If it means you shall all enter hell, that means everyone, good or bad doers, they will all enter this hell. And it doesn't make any sense. It'll go against the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if a person has been good, why is he being brought into this hellfire? Some believe that it means that all the people will approach it, whether they are good or bad. They believe that the good people will then be released, but the wicked ones will be then placed therein. So everyone will approach this hellfire, where means wariduha does not literally means they will enter it, but rather they will all approach it. And then once they all approach it, then they will be directed into the directions that they mean. Because the same word has been used in different connotations in Quran as well. Others believe that it does not imply just an approach to hell, rather it means that all people will enter hell. There are some commentators who believe, no, we don't have to go into describing or giving some sort of explanation as to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that people will approach or the other things. No. They say, well, everyone will enter regardless of, because the verse is very clear. It's not among those verses which is resembling or mutashabih. It is very clear that every single person will enter hell. So then, how do you go ahead and justify the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's that rather it means that all people will enter hell. However, believers are saved from the fire and the unbelievers will remain there. So everybody will enter this hell, but the believers will not touch the fire, but the unbelievers will be thrown into this fire. The last sentence of the verse is, and the related traditions all support this view. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari was asked about this verse. He pointed towards his ears and he said that I swear to Allah that both of my ears, that Prophet said the following, and may I get deaf or become deaf from both my ears if I was to lie. And what did he say? He said, when we asked Prophet about this verse, he said the word wariduha, al-wurud yani ad-dukhul. He said this word's entry means that they are really going to go in. There are no good doers or bad doers that will not enter hell. That means everyone will enter hell. However, the fire will cool off for the believers and it will be safe for them, just as it was safe for Ibrahim. The verse was revealed, "O fire, be cool and safe for Ibrahim." And then the hell will cry out from the excessive cold. Then God will rescue the pious people and abandon the oppressors in it in the state of humiliation. So this point of view suggests that everyone will enter, but because of the believers and their good deeds, the fire will not harm it. Rather, they will be affecting the fire and it will be becoming cool for them, to the extent the fire will cry out, "Leave now, because now you're cooling it off for me and for those who are unbelievers who deserve this fire." This is where Rasulullah says, تَقُولُ النَّارُ لِلْمُؤْمِنَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ جُزْ يَا مُؤْمِنْ فَقَدْ أَطْفَأَ نُورُكَ لَهْبِي. On the resurrection day, the fire will tell the believers, "Pass through, quickly go through, O believer, for your light has extinguished my flames." So this is the wujud of a mu'min. In other words, Prophet is mentioning, and this ayat is mentioning, that it is actually going to affect the fire of hell, and therefore fire will be crying out that leave quickly, because your nur is basically extinguishing this fire. When the mu'min is able to extinguish the fire of the hell on the day of judgment, can this same woman not do the same thing in this particular world, to go ahead and put out the fire flames which are ignited by the evils of shaitan? The other traditions regarding the bridge over the hell that is finer than the hair and sharper than the sword also support this view. In a tradition from Rasulullah which says, يَرِدُ النَّاسِ النَّارَ ثُمَّ يَصْدُرُونَ بِأَعْمَالِهِمْ. And this is a very beautiful hadith. Inshallah, this is the last in regards to the rights of the feet. And inshallah, we'll discuss the rights of the hand. He says, يَرِدُ النَّاسُ النَّارَ ثُمَّ يَصْدُرُونَ بِأَعْمَالِهِمْ فَأَوَّلُهُمْ كَلَمْحِ الْبَرْكِ. He says, all the people will enter hell, as the verse is saying, وَارِدُهَا, everyone will enter hell. But leave it according to their deeds. That everyone in this world or in this universe will enter this hell, but they will be leaving it according to their deeds. What does that mean? It says some come out like a flash of lightning. Like a flash of lightning, which is there for a second, you see it and then it disappears. So quick that you can't even realize it or rationalize it. But then it disappears right away. He said this is the amount of some people who will be spending in this hell. They'll pass through it like a flash of lightning. Some come out with the speed of a strong wind. Others will come out like a fast running horse. Those horses will run quickly. Some come out like a horse that is walking. Some will come out like a person that is walking fast. And some will leave like a person walking at a normal speed. So based on this hadith, our actions will dictate our speed on that day, how quickly we come out or how slowly we come out of this hellfire. That is, if we come out of it at all. Inshallah, we all come out of this hellfire with the speed of lightning, as Rasulullah is mentioning in this particular hadith. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now turning our attention towards the right of the hands, that Imam says, and the right of your hand is that you stretch it not toward that which is unlawful to you. As I said, all of these organs and body parts that Imam is mentioning, initially he is giving a generalized, perception about it, that this is what you're not supposed to use it for. For the rights of feet, for the rights of tongue, for the rights of eyes, all of them, the first thing that Imam said was what? The same thing that Imam is repeating over here, that do not utilize it for anything that is unlawful for you. Same thing Imam says over here, that the right of your hand is that you stretch it not towards that which is unlawful to you, should you do so. But if you had gone ahead and stretched it out for something which was unlawful to you, you will be chastised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in future, and you're not secure from the blameful tongue of the people right now in this world. So there are two effects of it. If you do stretch your hand out for something which is unlawful, where you should not be reaching out to Two immediate effects. One effect will be in the hereafter when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be punishing you for it. Second will be people will be blaming you, or their blameful tongue will be addressing you. Do not prevent your hands from performing what God has made obligatory upon them. You should honor your hands in such a way as to prevent them from engaging in many of the deeds that are not allowed for you. So in other words, Imam is actually giving us a realization that go ahead and honor your hands. These hands are to be honored and not to be used in something which is against the teachings and the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you start thinking about something in the matter of honoring them, then you will never associate them with something which is haram or disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam is actually taking us in a whole new direction. Instead of focusing and telling us, okay, no, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, Imam is directing our attention towards, no, forget about those things. You shouldn't do them at all anyway. But go ahead and honor your hands. Once you start honoring something or someone, you don't even associate anything bad with them at all. Hand is used in several contexts in Quran by the Almighty Lord. First, in one of the places in Surah Ali Imran, verse number 26, the hand represents the possession of rule. It says, وَقُلِ اللَّهُمَّ, or rather, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكُ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكِ الْخَيْرِ إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. It says, you make mighty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that all good is in your hand. Indeed, you have power over all things. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything, possession is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The whole ayat translates as this: O Allah, master of all sovereignty, you give sovereignty to whomever you wish. You strip off sovereignty whomever you wish. You make mighty whomever you wish, and you abase whomever you wish. All good is in your hand. Indeed, you have power over all things. So over here, the word hand or yad is basically used for the possession of rule. At another place, it is basically indicating stinginess or the generosity of human beings. It says in Surah Ma'idah, verse number 64, that وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَلُعِنُوا بِمَا قَالُوا بل يداه مبسوطتان ينفق كيف يشاء وليزيدن كثيرا منهم. It said the Jews said, Allah's hand is tied up. They're tied up to their, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies by tied up is their hands, and cursed be they for what they have said. Rather, his hands are wide open. He bestows as he wishes. Now obviously, some people went ahead and took these ayat in literal sense, saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying his hands are wide open. That means if they're wide open, that means Allah possesses the hands. Over here, it's not talking about the literal hands. Rather, he's talking about the concept and the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses. Wherever the word yad has appeared in Quran, usually it is talking about the quwwat and the power. Yadullah fawqa aydihim. The hand of Allah is above their hands. Does that mean Allah has hands? No, He doesn't. Rather, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over or supersedes the power of other individuals. Same thing is being said over here, that when the Jews said Allah is stingy, God forbid, He is not generous. As some people today also, you read in different mediums, you read about this, that people are saying if some tragedy happens somewhere and someone says, may Allah, grant them sabr, and may Allah, prevent this from happening, right away people, those who don't believe in God, they go ahead and say, well, if there was God, this would have never taken place in the first place. So right away, they're trying to prove that there's no God from this aspect, that this incident has taken place. If there was God, this wouldn't have taken place. Same thing with the Jews were doing at that time. They were saying, look, if it was the case, Allah would have been generous. He would have given to us. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His hands are tied up. When we mean His hands are tied up, it's basically an analogy. It is an example which is given usually when you said to someone that go ahead and donate. And if they don't donate, you say, well, their hands are in their pockets, or their hands are tied up, or their hands are tied to their back. That means that they're not opening up their hands. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no. بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. The hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that hypothetical condition is that the hands are wide open. And He does good with His hands wide open. In fact, some of our mufassirin use this ayah to go ahead and explain how the prayers performed with the open hands is actually correct, or how we believe in it. He says, look, this particular verse could be used as the reference to that as well. Because the Jew says the hands of Allah is tied up. Allah said, no, his hands are wide open and he does good with his hands open. Among the good actions, if you go ahead and count, which is the best of actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for mankind? The only one action for which we say, Hayya ala khairil amal. We do not say Hayya ala khairil amal towards the fast. We do not say Hayya ala khairil amal towards the hajj. We don't say Hayya ala khairil amal towards khums and zakat and all the other wajibat. The only place we say Hayya ala khairil amal is the salat, that come towards the best of the action. Here Allah says He performs good things with His hands open. When Allah is giving us the sunnah that He does things with hands open, although it's a hypothetical situation over here, you and I are told to do the same thing. The best of the action is the performance of salat. Therefore, it should also be done bal yadahu mabsutatan, with the hands wide open. In third place, Quran is using, or the word yad, or the hand, is used to refer to possession of power. It says, وَاذْكُرْ إِبَادَنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ أُولِي الْأَيْدِي وَالْأَبْصَارِ. And commemorate our servants Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub, possessor of power and vision. So over here the word aidi, which is the plural, is referring towards power. It's not referring towards the hand itself, rather. It says hand as a source of corruption is also mentioned in Quran as well, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Zahar al-fasadu fil barri wal bahr bima kasabat aydin nas. He said corruption has appeared in the land and sea because of the doings of the people's hands, what people had done with their hand, that He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may take them, or may make them taste something of what they have done, so that they may come back to Him. So over here we see that, Zahar al-Fasad, the fasad and the corruption that is happening in the world, it is also the product of the hands of mankind. Even though our hands are such important God-given blessings and gifts that have a compensation equal to full compensation of one's life, as far as the diyat is all concerned, they're also considered to be the source of corruption, as the verse that I just recited in front of you. Undoubtedly, the crimes are committed using these hands and affect of both individuals and society. It is affecting both individuals and the society. There will also be reactions to these deeds. We read in the following verse when it says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُو عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. He said, whatever affliction that may visit you is because of what your hands have done. Any type of musibat that falls upon you. It says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُصِيبَةٍ. There is not a musibat that does not afflict you, except that it is caused by your own hands, and you have earned it with your own hands. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again excuses many an offense. This is in Surah Shura, verse number 30. Thus we realize that many misfortunes that we experience are direct result of our own deeds, things that are caused by our own hands, and are sometimes divine punishment, as we read, وَأَنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيَكُمْ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. It says, spend in the way of Allah, and do not cast yourselves with your own hands into destruction, and be virtuous. Again, this particular ayat is talking about how hands are responsible for the generosity that could go ahead and take us out of this destruction, and that can lead us towards receiving the love and the virtue from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we are admonished against doing evil deeds that will result in our destruction. We are encouraged to give charity and do good deeds. We see that even further along, murders are also committed with this hand. Even some of the tradition in this regard, I want to mention a few traditions before I finish, that in a tradition from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, which is in Usul al-Kafi, and if you look at it, there's actually a whole chapter on the hands and the body parts. To the extent that Imam has mentioned about the hands, that there's a whole chapter which, the Sahib Usul Kafi Kulaini, Sheikh Kulaini has mentioned in his book in regards to, there's a whole chapter, there's a whole section about the hands. And one of those ahadith, our sixth Imam says, وَفَرَضَ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْيَدَيْنِ أَنْ لَا يَبْتِشَ بِهِمَا. He says, and God made it incumbent upon the hands not to extend out for what God has made forbidden. Same thing what Imam Zainul Abidin in his rights of the hands has mentioned. And do what the Almighty has decreed for them, including giving charity, establishing the ties of kinship, fighting in the way of Allah, and making ablution for the prayers. Why? If you look at it, one of the verses of Quran, Surah Ma'idah, verse number 6, which is the whole explanation of as to how to perform the wudu. What does the ayah say? Well, it says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, idha qumtum ila salati faghsilu wujuhakum wa aydiyakum. It says, oh, you who have faith, when you stand up for prayer, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows, and wipe a part of your heads and your feet up to the ankles. Now this verse is the most straightforward verse that you can find as far as wudu is concerned. Anyone ask you, why do you perform wudu in such a manner? People usually ask, if you're in different settings, especially when you're visiting for Umrah or you've gone for Hajj, people might ask you, look at you, the way you perform your wudu. Right away they'll have questions as to what did you just do? I'll repeat this ayah. Surah Ma'idah, verse number 6. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there are two parts which you wash. فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. You wash your faces and you wash your hands. And there are two wipings that Allah is saying, that you wipe. وَامْسَحُوا, do masah of your feet and your heads. The two washing and there are two wipings which are being clearly mentioned in this particular verse of Quran. How do you go ahead and determine from it when the ayat is such clear, when the ayat is so open, there's no ambiguity in this ayah. It is not mutashabih, it is so muhkam, it is so easy to understand. Why do you go ahead and misunderstand and you perform wudu the way you wish, the way you feel? So this is actually the correct way of performing the wudu when this verse of Quran is mentioning itself. Surah Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse number 6, it says, oh, you who have faith, when you stand up for prayer, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbow. And a lot of people say, well, and when it comes to washing, when you're doing wudu, you see a lot of brothers washing it like this, going like this. It says up to the elbow, or you go like this when you're going towards the elbow, so you don't go beyond it. Well, usually when we say you wash it from top to bottom, you don't wash it from bottom to top. And that's why if a person washes it from bottom to top, it actually invalidates the wuzu. So you're supposed to wash it from top to bottom. So, this is not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically giving us this criteria. This is the amount that you wash. And when you ask as to why from top to bottom, it's very easy to understand. When a person says, you're going to color this wall from here to there, they're basically telling you that this is the limit that you will be coloring the wall. But they're not telling you from down to up that you will be coloring. The normal scenario is that usually you color from top to bottom. You start from top and you come your way down, because that's the normal flow goes. And the same thing is being mentioned over here when you wash your hands from up until your elbows. It's not that you have to go ahead and go from bottom to up. And this is the direction which is being mentioned. Rather, this is just the limit which is being mentioned. So you go from top to bottom, and that is the way it is correct to perform this wudu. And then there are other things which people have brought up in this regards. I won't go into those details. As far as the function of this hand is concerned, there are other things which are mentioned, such as the bayat is also performed with this hand. When you pay allegiance, back in the day, the allegiance was paid to the Amir al-Mu'mineen or the leader of the Ummah, and they would put their hands on top of the hands of the leader of the Ummah, and that was the way of paying their allegiance. And by doing so, they were saying that, we believe in, or we obey, we're accepting that we will be obeying this person as long as we are alive. And among those things are seventh Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salatu wasalam, when it comes to the pledge of allegiance by men, was done by shaking hands. However, when Imam mentions that, he says in this regard, he says, Salasun mubiqatun nakathus safaqati wa tarkus sunnati wa firaqul jama'ati. It is very important that when a person performs this allegiance, that among the things that Imam says, there are 3 sins which will cause one's destruction. Among those 3 things is breaking this allegiance. It says breaching one's allegiance, abandoning the tradition of Rasulullah, and separation of oneself from the society. So we see that this hand has many things that can be performed with it. There are many functions of this hand, from the physical aspect, if you look at it, from the even spiritual aspect, the things that insan can reach to, or by giving through this hand. Today we were reading a hadith, and it's a very beautiful hadith that I came across. I just wanted to share. I'm done with my discussion, but a very beautiful hadith that I came across. And it was a hadith in which our Imam, and you look at it, and when you ponder over these ahadith, you really understand the depths of it, and you see that in one sentence how Masumin were able to go ahead and put the entire, philosophy of ethics behind it. Imam very beautifully in single sentence said, he said, Qutul jisme or Qutul ajsame at-ta'am. He said, the food for the body is what you eat, the ta'am. But he says, Qutul arwahe al-it'am. But the food for the body is when you feed others. He said, when you feed yourself, it is the food for your body. But when you feed yourself, it is the food for your body. But when you feed others, it is actually food for your ruh, and it is food for your spirit. Such beautiful hadith that Imam is saying that how when you feed yourself, basically you're feeding your own belly so that you can continue your life. But when you feed others, you're basically feeding your soul. By being generous, by feeding others, by taking care of the bellies of other individuals, you're basically continuing the irtiqa and taking the soul to the heights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us. Ghafarallahu lana wa lakum wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu salluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima.